Well, pressure is again intensifying on Israel after US Vice President Kamala Harris called for a ceasefire in Gaza and rebuked the humanitarian catastrophe there. Opinions on the war are sharply divided in America, Israel's most important ally, a fact laid bare by the death of US Airman Aaron Bushnell last week. The 25-year-old set himself alight outside the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., shouting "Free Palestine" and declaring he would no longer be complicit in genocide. Well, presidential candidate Dr. Cornel West stirred up controversy by posting the following to X. Let us never forget the extraordinary courage and commitment of brother Aaron Bushnell, who died for truth and justice. I pray for his precious loved ones. Let us rededicate ourselves to genuine solidarity with Palestinians undergoing genocidal attacks in real time. Well, many Jewish commentators said Dr. West's comments encourage political violence by those opposed to Israel's existence. But joining me now to discuss his controversial post is the independent presidential candidate, Professor Cornel West. Cornel, great to see you. Thank you very much for coming back on Uncensored.
Always a blessing to be in conversation with you, my brother.
And the feeling is very mutual. Let me just ask you. Many people were pretty surprised by the tone of your tweet, not least the fact that you would categorise what Aaron Bushnell did as extraordinary courage and commitment. Many people think it was the act of somebody quite possibly very seriously mentally ill, taking his life in dramatic circumstances, and that was not necessarily consistent with being courageous or committed.
Well, one is that you think of Cato the Younger when he killed himself as the Roman Empire began to emerge and the Roman Republic was collapsing. And Cato's killing of himself has become one of the grand examples of moral courage and a willingness to bear witness as to something that he deeply opposed. Now, I think it's very interesting that so many of the people who were critical of me talking about the courage of my dear brother Aaron, that they don't understand the depths and scope of the suffering right now in Gaza. And too many of them actually are even indifferent to the genocide. They're indifferent to the ethnic cleansing. They're indifferent to the apartheid-like conditions. And so I can understand them saying, well, I am promoting violence by acknowledging the tremendous courage in engage in a moral witness in which you kill yourself as a way of calling attention not to yourself, but to suffering of precious Palestinians in Gaza. That's what Aaron was doing. In the same way Cato was doing the same thing when they saw Julius Caesar moving into the highest position, and it was clear that the republic was coming to a close and the empire was being established.
Okay, but
and there's a whole host of examples of people who bear witness by killing themselves.
Let me ask you this then.
Suicide. No, that's not the point. It's right. The cause that they're bearing witness to. And that's where my difference with so many of my deeply conservative and moderate Jewish brothers and sisters comes in. If they're indifferent to the suffering in Gaza, then it's going to be difficult for me to even have a conversation, because for me, it's a state of emergency. For me, we need that sense of urgency. These massacres are taking place before our very eyes. We ought to be on fire. We ought to be deeply concerned.
Let me ask you this. Would you have said the same thing if this airman had killed himself in this manner outside the Palestinian embassy in Washington, D.C., if there is one, or whatever the central location is for Palestinians in Washington, the day after October the 7th, and reversed it and said, I'm doing this in response to the horror committed by Hamas on Jewish people in Israel? Would you have felt the same way about what happened?
Oh, absolutely. Murder is murder, though, brother. That when you kill innocent people, when you kill civilians, those are crimes against humanity. Now, I have a larger indictment of Israeli apartheid. I have a larger indictment of the Israeli occupation of Palestinians. But anytime any organized group kills innocent people, especially innocent children, I will be in opposition. That's true for US troops. That's true for British troops. That's true for the IDF. That's true for Iranian troops. That's true for Chinese troops. That's true for Indian troops. Any organized army that kills innocent people, especially children, for me is murder. I'm morally consistent in that regard. And that therefore, if somebody kills themselves in order to call attention to the suffering of precious innocent people, especially precious innocent children, I am going to acknowledge that courage and say, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. And I don't mind being morally consistent and therefore having people thoroughly misunderstand me, because I do not look at the world through a narrow set of ideological lens. I try to stay in contact with the humanity of all innocent people and all children, no matter what color, Palestinian, Israeli, Ethiopian, Guatemalan. I fundamentally believe that a Palestinian baby has the same value as an Israeli baby. The problem is, you and I know that if Palestinians were doing this to Israelis, Biden, Harris, Blinken, all of these folks who are enabling this genocide, enabling these crimes against humanity, they would have a very different view because they're not morally consistent. They don't believe that a Palestinian life has the same value as an Israeli life.
Well, I certainly do, but I certainly think
believe that.
I certainly do, but I also believe that the purest definition of genocide is Hamas's view of Jewish people in Israel. They want to get rid of all of them. They've made it very clear publicly since October the 7th that they want to commit that kind of atrocity again and again and again and just get rid of all Jewish people in Israel. That actually is the purest definition of genocide, isn't it?
Well, genocide has to do with intent as well as execution.
But you accept that Hamas are genocidal in their intent?
When Hamas was founded in 1988 as a response to a vicious Israeli occupation, they were wrong. They were calling for the forms of violent resistance that too often did include killing innocent folk, because, of course, innocent Palestinians had been killed for 75 years by the IDF and others. They did change their charter. There's been struggles within the Hamas itself, and the Palestinian people themselves are, how would you put it? The Palestinian people themselves are resisting with tremendous dignity, and Hamas has emerged as a major institutional vehicle, and that institutional vehicle, for me, does involve crimes against humanity when they kill innocent folk.
Well, they've emerged. I mean, look, let's be clear. Let's be clear. They've emerged as a terrorist organization committing acts of mass terrorism. I mean, that's what they are.
No, Hamas is a counter-terrorist group responding to the terrorism of the IDF and responding to the terrorism of the Israeli state. A counter-terrorist group can commit war crimes, brother, but they didn't initiate it at all. If they're founded in 1988, and the terrorism began in 1948 with the state of Israel, that's 40 whole years.
Yeah,
and let's keep in mind.
Yeah, I think it's a stretch to call them counter. I think it's a stretch with
undermine
respect.
The PLO, undermine secular nationalism, promote fundamentalist Islam as a way of dividing Palestinians. That's why Netanyahu allowed for Gaza, allowed for Hamas to gain access to the money from Qatar and others.
Yeah, I agree.
To keep the Palestinians divided and therefore not having to move to deal with the suffering
Dr. West,
of Palestinians.
Look, there are many things that we would find agreement on about the way Palestinians have been treated for a very long time. It has been a completely unacceptable occupation.
Well,
it should not have dragged on. But hang on. Let me finish.
Vicious,
I know.
ugly.
Let me finish. But the idea that you categorize Hamas after October 7th as counter-terrorists is ridiculous. They are terrorists, and they should be called what they are. Anyway,
but let me ask you this. Do you think the IDF is terrorists when they kill innocent Palestinians? Do you believe?
I think it depends.
Yes or no, my brother? Yes or no?
Well, okay, I would ask you this. If you were
yes or no?
No,
yes or no?
Hang on.
You're uncensored. You're uncensored,
yes,
my brother.
And I've been
yes
asked this question before. I have actually tweeted in 2014. I tweeted that what Israel was doing then was bordering on terrorism. I'm not afraid of using that analogy.
Bordering on terrorism.
Yeah, but hang on.
The children are being killed, brother.
Yes, of course. There were children killed on October the 7th. I have serious misgivings about what's happening currently in Gaza, like most people. But what I would say to you, if you were the head of the Israeli government on October the 7th, out of interest, what would your response have been to that horrendous terror attack?
Well, I'll tell you the answer to that question, but I don't know why you just can't say the IDF is terrorists, killing innocent people, bordering on it's wrong. No, why you're uncensored. You're a free man. Tell the truth from your soul.
I am telling the truth.
Let me tell you what I would do if I was in Israel. I would end the occupation. I would end the siege. I was saying I'm committed to Palestinian dignity. I'm committed to Palestinian equality. And we Palestinians and Israelis, we Jews and Palestinians, we're going to learn how to live together in the context of equality and dignity. We're going to have Jewish safety. We're going to have Jewish security. That's the very end and aim of Israel. We'll never see an annihilation of Jews. We'll never see another massacre or Holocaust of Jews, but we'll never see annihilation and massacre and vicious attacks on Palestinians either. That's what I would do.
Well, on that,
not just as head of Israel. That's what I'll do in the White House, brother. That's what I'll do in the White House. And I'll explain to American people why it is that Biden and Harris and others continue to enable this genocide. And then when they finally say ceasefire, they act like we ought to give them a moral prize or something after 30,000 precious people have already been killed.
Yeah, listen, there's a lot that you say that I agree with, just to be clear, okay?
No, I hear you, I hear you.
Okay, I just want to read you what Ben Shapiro said about your tweet, though, about Aaron Bushnell. He said, our political environment is facilitating dangerous insanity. It is easy enough for people like Cornel West to celebrate the pseudo-heroism of disturbed people lighting themselves on fire, but both the mentally disturbed and our society pay the price for such celebration. I mean, he has a point, doesn't he? You wouldn't want other people to go and set fire to themselves and kill themselves like he did, would you?
Brother, I have deep libertarian sensibilities. I believe that people make choices and they have to take responsibilities. They make decisions, they have to deal with the consequences. I do not promote people killing themselves, not at all. But people do a number of different things. I would want to ask Brother Shapiro. He's talking about there's heroes in the Israeli Defense Forces, many of whom are killing innocent children. Do I think that's sick? Yes, that is morally bankrupt. It is spiritually empty. It is ethically vacuous. I come right back at Shapiro. Your heroes happen to be engaged in terrorist activity against Palestinians. And you're going to say, Aaron's not a hero. Aaron is a particular person who exercised a certain kind of witness and ended up taking the form of killing himself in order not to bring attention to himself, but to try to give some sense of urgency for a genocide. Do you believe
Aaron Bushnell?
That's what Brother Shapiro doesn't want to focus on.
Do you believe
Shapiro still wants to hide his indifference to the suffering of Palestinians in the form of attacking me?
Okay, let me ask you.
How cowardly can you get, my brother?
Do you believe that Aaron Bushnell is a martyr?
Well, martyr and witness really have the same root, as you know, in the Greek. And martyr means someone who pays an ultimate cost tied to a higher cause. I believe trying to bring attention to genocide and bring genocide to a close is a higher cause. And I believe that his actions was trying to bring attention to that higher cause. So yes, he is a martyr, absolutely.
Dr. West, always good to talk to you on Uncensored. Thank you very much.
It's always a blessing. Stay strong, my brother.